welcome to PolkaWorld Interview.
Thank you.
First of all, just to set the tone for the listeners, so could you share what is the Polimec is and what difference, maybe my head a little bit ahead, how it differs from other similar products, whether it is CoinList or just one idea out there and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. It's sort of a pleasure to be able to talk also to the Chinese and Asian communities. Mm-hmm. So shortly on Polimec, and for going into that, also a bit about myself. Some of the community members might know me already as a CFO for Web3 Foundation. So I was a CFO for Web3 Foundation for the past 4 years, and some of the things that we work with in Web3 and how to figure out how do we actually make Polkadot regulatory compliant in what we're doing is some of these learnings that I actually have used to put into Polimec together with my co-founders. Mm-hmm. So a really short introduction to Polimec is that Polimec is an on-chain community-led fundraising platform. So what that basically means is that we want to make sure that we can do regulatory compliant fundraising for teams in the Web3 space. So fundraising can mean a lot of things. And for a lot of people in the community, in the blockchain space, a lot of fundraising that you can access as a community member usually ends up in being just before the projects go to launch on like a launch pad or something like that. For us, that model doesn't really actually benefit neither the community or the people that actually purchase tokens at the launch pad or the project, because it's very close to the actual mainnet launch, and usually it's very centralized and not something that actually can give a long-term vision for the community to be a part of the projects. So what we were looking at is saying, how can we actually disrupt the fundraising space generally in crypto and blockchain? And with Polimec, what we want to do is actually we want to go out and collaborate with projects at a very early stage. So already when projects are doing like a pre-seed funding or seed funding, of how do we make sure that the projects get the right mix of VCs, professionals, and community members to actually participate in the project from very early stage. So what we do there with Polimec is that we enable both VCs and professionals and the community to invest alongside each other on the same terms, but in a very transparent and very decentralized manner. Because one of the problems with fundraising today as well is that the transparency in fundraising is just not there. You don't really know what's going on. It's a very intransparent market, and sometimes it's also very trust-based because you heard about someone that says this might be good, but you don't really know about the project. So what we want to do is actually address these information asymmetries in the market, make it much more efficient for projects to raise funds, and do it from a very early stage. Because you need various stakeholders in your project. So you need VCs and you need professional investors, because blockchain is high entry barriers and it's fairly expensive to actually build. So there is a certain need for getting cash in. But of course, there's also the community. Like without the community, without your users, it doesn't matter if you have the best product in the world. If you don't have any users and if you don't have any community, then it's never going to be great. So what we're doing with Polimec is that we allow the VCs and the professionals to figure out what should the price be. And then we also allow for the community to actually invest alongside the VCs and the professionals at the same terms, so that you can actually, as a community member, participate really, really early and support that project all the way through its phases. And the project can then use Polimec all the way through their setup of raising funds, from they start with pre-seed funding all the way to actually releasing their mainnet token. So for us, it's really important to have a long-term relationship with the projects, but also that Polimec is completely decentralized. Anyone can use it. We see it sort of as fundraising infrastructure for Web3, because that's some of these things that we don't have today. And then one of the things we add on as well is we talk a lot about regulatory compliance. And that we also have because we are utilizing credentials for any participants. So one of the major problems in crypto is, and where crypto sometimes is clashing a bit with regulation, is the anonymity on crypto, or at least pseudonymity on crypto. What we are doing is that we're collaborating with the KIL protocol in making sure that we can actually utilize the KIL protocol to get trusted third-party providers to do KYC AML, issue that as credentials on the KIL protocol, and then we use that for being able to access the Polimec protocol. So on Polimec or the projects, they never get information about who the people investing or participating is actually doing, or they don't know who they are, but they have a credential that issued by a trusted third party saying that they actually provide KYC AML on that particular participant. So there you can say all the projects are sure that no one comes in and are able to participate without doing KYC AML, and the projects can actually curate which jurisdictions or which countries would they like to include, and potentially which would they like to exclude. Usually, I think when you see fundraising, then a lot of projects are saying we don't want any US participants because this is tricky. So this is some of the things that you can do with the credentials, is that you can ask for the participants to reveal their country of residence, but that's the only thing they reveal. So you can still interact with Polimec anonymously, but you can still do it so that everyone understands that that you are still have done full KYC AML.
Polimec solves the KYC problems and helps the VCs and retailers got more transparency on investment. And in the market, there are already some projects doing the same things, such as CoinList, and they already takes a big share of the market. You know, how large is the market? You know, before, because Polimec already just started the market. You know, how large is the market, and how large is the market going to be, and what share of the market do you intend to capture?
So good question. I think it was one of the things we were playing a bit around with when we were coming up with the concept of Polimec. Of CoinList is a good player in the market, but the problem with CoinList is that it's not decentralized, and it's definitely not transparent. So to be able to use CoinList, you actually have to pay quite a high fee to CoinList, and then the magic happens behind the scenes. You don't see what it is, and then hopefully you have a successful fundraise. I think for us, that can be done much better. I think when we look at Web3, then Web3 is all about giving power back to the users and make sure that there is transparency and that we act decentralized without information asymmetries. And for me, CoinList or other of these trust-based intermediaries in the market is not really providing that. They're making it very difficult to figure out what's going on. It's difficult to figure out the price that CoinList comes up with for a token. Is this the right price or not? You probably have to trust them or make you some kind of due diligence on it. And for us, that is problems that we need to solve, and problems that Polimec actually is a part of solving. First of it is that we are completely decentralized, completely transparent. It's open source software. Also, we are doing a community-led due diligence. So everybody that actually has a credential and have access to Polimec can then actually view the information that the projects are uploading for fundraising. So it could be their pitch documents, it could be their white paper, their light paper, and anyone can actually participate in what we call a decentralized and community-led due diligence process. This is what we call evaluators. And these evaluators can be anyone in the community, anyone with any kind of opinion about the project. So it could be someone that has gone through the entire tokenomics of the project and say, hey, yeah, I think this is good. So you can support that on chain. Or it could be someone that actually goes through their entire code and say, well, I don't like the code and this is not good enough. So then maybe you don't want to give it a positive evaluation. So we want to make that due diligence process also transparent and accessible for anyone. Then when we come into the fundraising and come into the market size, then what we look at in 2022 is that more than 1,700 projects raised more than $37 billion in venture funds in 2022. And we all know how general crypto markets were in 2022. It wasn't the greatest. So looking at it over time and with the promises that that blockchain have, that a lot of innovation is actually happening on chain. So we see that number of fundraising actually to go up over the next many years. How big our market share will be is a good question. Hopefully it will be. Hopefully it's going to be significant. But what is most important for us is that we can actually come up with a solution that anyone can use and do it like in a proper, decentralized and transparent way. So it's a bit of disrupting the intermediary trust-based markets. And I think when we look at what's going on right now with regulatory crackdowns on exchanges and similar market intermediaries in crypto, then going the full decentralized way is the right way. It's not the easy way because building decentralized is quite tricky, but it's the way that you have to go to make sure that we can actually deliver the promise of what you can actually do with blockchain and create a truly trustless internet over time.
You know, there's always a trade-off, you know, because for the you know, evaluators, for normal users, you know, if I know a project that was invested by a great VC, you know, in my heart, I will, you know, wow, this gonna be a great project. So if you give the right to the normal evaluators, how do you make sure their expertise, normal people can evaluate a good project or?
So this is actually one of the nice things that you can actually see that in different ways. So what we do with the evaluators is that we have economic incentives on Polimec to incentivize evaluators taking a conscious decision if the project is good or not. So as an evaluator, what you do on Polimec is that you have to bond your Polimec tokens or a certain number of Polimec tokens for doing the evaluation. So if you get the evaluation right, and right now what we're doing on Polimec is the evaluation is a question of if you think the project will get a successful fundraise or not. If you think the fundraise is going to be successful, you can bond a number of Polimec tokens and say, yes, I think the project is going to be successful. If you are right, then we will reward you with a number of tokens in the project raising funds. So you get a positive reward if you get it right. However, and that's the important thing, if you get it wrong, we will also slash a portion of your Polimec tokens. So you can't just say, I think it's going to be a good project, let's go for it, because you actually are getting penalized if you get it wrong, but obviously you're getting rewarded if you get it right. So that's one part of the mechanism. The second part we have is that over time, with several fundraisers on Polimec, what we can do with the power of credentials is that, first of all, we can do, let's say, call it a leaderboard of evaluators. So you can actually see the track record of evaluators and see how have they actually performed in the past. Have they been correct or have they been wrong? What you can also do, and this is actually interesting when it comes to VCs, so professional investors, because as you say, they could provide a good insight as well, is that they can, of course, also be part of the evaluators. What you could do with your credential is that you can decide if you want to be public with who you are, or if you want to be still be synonymous. So what you can do with the credentials is that you can actually do an evaluation, and then you can on-chain disclose who you are via your credential. You can choose to do so. It's not something that Polimec can choose. It's something that you choose directly out of your wallet with the credential. So you're in full own power of that. We don't even know who the evaluators are. But what you can also do is you can connect your credentials to your social media profiles. So let's say you want to do an evaluation, you can do it on chain, and then you can link your on-chain vote to, let's say, your Medium or your Twitter or Discord, so that, and then on Twitter or Discord or Reddit, you can actually write more specifically why you have done an evaluation in a certain kind of way. So you can provide that much more information. And of course, if you're a VC, then maybe your word has a bit more weight than if you just are a community member that hasn't really done an evaluation before. But of course, also on how many Polimec tokens are you bonding, depending on how many tokens you're willing to put at stake. That would also show the community a bit about how sure are you of your evaluation. So we have sort of several safeguards to make sure that we can provide more information about which of the evaluators have a good track record, which have a good name, and which one can be seen as being good actors, and which one should you follow or not.
Yes, and in that way, individual investors can play more important roles. That that go for the inspiration of Web3.
Exactly.
And fundraising in Web3 has a high entry barrier, but there's some lucky team with solid background and fancy ideas. They were initially sought after by good capitals, and they don't need to lower their threshold to attract more capital. But these projects are, that are sought after by many ordinary investors like me who want to participate in, the Tier 1 project. So does this kind of Tier 1 project need help from Polimec? And, we hope so, because in that way, normal users like me, can get equipment opportunities get, to get the share, to get the opportunity to invest.
And I think actually that's really key to what we're doing. I think you definitely have very large projects that are sought after by VCs that we have seen before goes down the road of then they're taking money from 3 or 4 VCs and then they continue to build for a couple of years before they go live. The problem on that is that you're not really appreciating your community in the same way, right? Not saying that this is sort of general for all these larger projects, but a lot of interest in projects in the crypto space is also the matter of fact that you can actually participate directly and not just read up on it, which is obviously very interesting, but you want to participate. So really what we see is that where you can actually have a win-win for everybody is that as a project, no matter how big you are, you want both to have the VCs, but you also want to have the community members in. And getting community members in is usually, it's a bit more tricky because obviously there's a lot more of them and it's more of a process to handle. Getting VCs is difficult enough. It requires a lot of phone calls and a lot of back and forth with professional VCs. But if you want to let's say for a big project, you want to get 10 or 20,000 community members in and actually participate in the project early on as well. This is an infrastructure thing. You need to figure out how do you actually build that, how do you execute these sales, and this is actually quite time consuming. And if you're a big project, if this is not your core business, why do you want to build it yourself? Why don't you utilize infrastructure that's already there? So for us, it's about making the fundraising much more cost efficient, both for small projects, but also for larger projects. And then we want to make sure also that you actually have something that works really well. You don't have to build it yourselves, and you have the entire regulatory piece in place as well to make sure that there's KYC, AML, that the process is following a proper design that is designed to mimic the way that you can do fundraisers in the larger jurisdictions in the world as well. So for us, it's very much of making equal opportunity for everybody. and making sure that that everything is as cost efficient for the projects as possible, but also to be open and allow the community early access. Because if you invest in an interesting project really early on, then you can follow them all the way on their journey, which is usually much more interesting than just sitting and looking at the sidelines, and then at the very last minute, or when they go on an exchange, you can participate. But if you're really keen on a project, you might want to participate early on. So why should that participation be ring-fenced only to VCs? Or you have to go out and figure out how do you invest in a VC that might invest into some kind of project I'm interested in. For us, it's a matter of how do we spread it out, and how do we make sure that that everybody can actually participate on a level playing field, and give the value back to the project as well of having a broad community from the very early stages.
Yeah, and so actually the Tier 1 project, they also, all of them actually want the involvement of the community, but it costs a lot. The time,
exactly,
time consuming, the procedures, it costs a lot. So Polimec can solve the problem, helps them and make their life more easy.
Yeah, so, and you can say the way we do it as well is there is actually no risk for the cost. Like if you use a coin list, or if you use a launchpad or similar to that, then you usually end up paying quite a high fee to actually utilize the platform.
Yeah.
What we do with Polimec is that as a participant, there is no entry fees whatsoever. You can the only thing you need to have is that you need to have your credential with AML KYC, then you can participate. For the projects raising funds, there is a fee that is paid to the Polimec protocol, but the entirety of that fee will actually go back to supporting the project. So the fee that anyone any issuer pays will be used to either reward the evaluators in the beginning, so the evaluators that are helping evaluating all the project details, to the long-term holders of the project, or to make sure that the project actually has a successful launch once they actually hit the mainnet of assisting the projects in that way as well. So all the fees is going back to the community. So Polimec is not keeping the tokens. It's a way of just distributing them over a long time for the benefit of the project and the benefit of the community for that single project. So as such, and that fee is only paid on the successful fundraise. So if you don't have a successful fundraise, then you can say it's actually free to use.
Are there other scenarios that you want to share that Polimec makes what is impossible to possible?
Well, I guess we can raise sort of a bit of information on it. I think one of the things we're very passionate about is looking at what you can actually do underneath credentials, with the whole regulatory environment going towards being much more careful. Then what we can do is seeing that there's a lot of business opportunities where you can do an issuance of tokens, but keep them underneath credentials. So obviously it could be KYC AML credentials, but any kind of other credentials where you need to ring fence a decentralized issuance of tokens. So that could be something that could be interesting at looking at sort of a bit further down the line. But what we're also looking at specifically for the fundraising mechanism is also to make sure that we want to start out and making sure that we can do it really well for the Polkadot ecosystem. But with the whole bridges coming up, then what also makes sense is also to look outside of the Polkadot ecosystem and say, how can we actually help projects that for various reasons are building on other technologies, but where we can actually help them with the fundraising process as well.
Let's turn our topic to compliance. Regulatory compliance will be one of the hottest topics of 2023. And it is becoming increasingly clear that compliance will not be a choice, but a requirement. Actually, before we dive into this topic, I would like to help myself and others who may be unsure about the concept of compliance, and help them to understand what we mean by it. And when we talk about compliance, we are mainly referring to what kind of compliance. Because we've heard a lot of sections, such as those from SEC or U.S. Department of Justice. Sometimes they're targeted at exchanges, and sometimes they are directed at protocols. So could you help us to understand this part?
Yeah, definitely. We'll be happy to talk about that. It's definitely a hot topic for 2023. I think my personal opinion is that it has been a hot topic or it should have been a hot topic for the past couple of years. So as you might know, then while I was at the Web3 Foundation, we worked very closely with the American regulators like the SEC. That was published in November 2022 in a blog post by the Web3 Foundation of how we actually, during the last 3.5 years, have been having multiple interactions directly with the SEC with the aim of understanding how do we actually do this in a compliant way. How do we make sure that the regulators actually understand blockchain technology and what it can do. And that has been hugely beneficial of getting that exposure directly. So when looking at the regulatory compliance, a lot of it goes into rules that already are in place today. I think blockchain has for years had a bit of this idea that this is a new technology and the regulation doesn't apply to us. For me, it's difficult to say that the regulation doesn't apply, because a lot of the things that has been done in crypto or in blockchain is very much things that usually would be captured by the laws already. So if you are a financial intermediary, so in the Web 2.0 world, or the world before crypto, was very much like banks or brokers or similar things to that. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that these ones are regulated entities, because they are by nature intransparent and very centralized. So what regulators are coming in and saying that we need to have some kind of control that these very centralized and intransparent entities are not just running away and doing things that will harm their the investors or the customers that are using these institutions. I think what we've seen in crypto in 2022 was that a lot of these centralized intermediaries in crypto ended up in the same problems, that they were doing offerings that were very intransparent, and some of these offerings showed that the setup was not good enough and they failed. Unfortunately, a lot of people ended up losing quite a lot of funds in this, and the whole regulatory setup is set up to actually protect from this happening. And for me, the promise of blockchain and a decentralized internet is very much that we can give away with these centralized entities and intransparent entities, which is why I'm talking so much about decentralization and transparency and having trustless network, because a trustless network or trustless intermediary, all of a sudden, you don't necessarily need to have the same checks and balances to make sure that no one person is getting greedy or is doing the wrong thing, and then all of a sudden you have a problem for a lot of people using that service. So by applying the whole set of decentralization, making sure that no one entity or no one small group of people are in control of a network, and making sure that it's completely transparent to all the users what's actually going on, that's a way of actually preempting the regulation, because regulation is in place to, and that's what the regulator is always saying, and some might not like what I'm saying, but that it's to protect the general investor. But that has always been why they're there, but the protection lies in the matter of that there should be some checks and balances in place. And crypto is really good at this. If you implement it decentralized, trustless, there's a lot of checks and balances in place, because this is software, and software is executing the same way every time. It doesn't care who actually interacts with it. It interacts basis rules. And that's very much what regulators are looking for as well.
Mm.
So for me, a lot of regulation is a way of solving these trust problems there is in the current financial system. And I think crypto has the promise to solve it, but unfortunately, a lot of crypto is still not very decentralized, and some of it is very intransparent. And for that, those entities should definitely be concerned about compliance and the crackdown that we are seeing, especially when you look at like centralized exchanges and these things. I don't necessarily like an exchange is a good thing. There is a need to have exchanges to have efficient markets and so on. But if it's centralized and transparent, there should also be a set of rules that you're sure that you act in a certain way, because otherwise you cannot trust what they're doing. So if they're not fully transparent, then there needs to be some regulation, so you're sure that everybody acts on a level playing field, because you cannot look at that yourself. So I think financial intermediaries, also financial intermediaries that deals in crypto, is still financial intermediaries, and there should be regulation. But if you have proper decentralized software that interacts in a way that everybody have a possibility to look through it and being fully transparent, that is for me sort of the next step, and that's where we can see of where we actually need to go to be able to deal with this regulatory crackdown on centralized intermediaries, which in the end it's probably going to be a good thing. It's a bit tough right now, and there's a lot of stuff happening, but in the end, I think if we get much more decentralization, much more trustless protocols, and much more transparency, then I think it's a good thing. Then we can build up the proper institutions as of there.
And let's turn our topic to Polkadot. So your project was founded in 2020, and in 2023, you will have the issuer, evaluator, and a participant on board and get a parachain on Polkadot. And the product is rolling out. What is the biggest challenges you are facing, and how do you plan to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, good question. I think there are a lot of challenges. Obviously, one of the challenges is actually building a fully fledged blockchain. But this is also one of the powerful things on Polkadot, and actually one of the reasons that it makes a lot of sense to build something like this on Polkadot, because you can build a fully fledged protocol that actually runs specifically for providing infrastructure to do fundraising on chain. Some of the things obviously that makes a lot of sense is the regulatory clarity. We talked before about how Polkadot has been working with the SEC for the last three plus years to figure out how do we actually do this in a proper way, and how do we make sure that that we stay compliant as being software and not necessarily something that is investment opportunities, but something that where you provide utility to the users. Users buy because they actually see the utility of what you're building, and that you can utilize that software for its intended purpose. And then seeing all the things that Polkadot can do, I think we are just starting out. I think there's a lot of things that are being rolled out right now on Polkadot that's very exciting. Obviously, the number of parachains continues to go up. There is an auction every second week on Polkadot, and there are new things being implemented currently. So you can see the OpenGov that has been implemented so far on Kusama, and hopefully will come on Polkadot very soon. The idea of the fellowship as well, of making sure that we get more builders involved in how we actually work with governance. And obviously also specifically for what we're working with on Polimec is the implementation of XCM v3. This is something that is actually quite keen on what we're doing, because we're trying to utilize that directly. We really believe in this notion of that everyone should build exactly what they're good at, and then you should actually integrate with other chains to use what they built of cool technology. So if we look at Polimec and Kills, it's very much of it's two separate parachains, but working very closely together, because Kilt is awesome at doing DIDs and credentials. We are good at doing fundraising infrastructure, and it makes sense to work together instead of us going out and creating our own DIDs, because why do that? Let's use interoperability to utilize what Kilt is good at, and then we have Polimec where we can do the fundraising. And the same thing is why we are working together with Moonbeam, and also looking at working together with some of the other smart contract platforms in the Polkadot ecosystem, because interoperability just allows us to be much more free and don't end up in these silos. So all of a sudden we have an ecosystem where we can actually utilize what each other is best at, and that's in itself is sort of on the way to how do we actually how do we generate an ecosystem that is really worth much more than some of its parts? Because the thing is that all the parts working together creates more value together than they do separately. And I think that's why Polkadot is a really great place to build. And also what we're seeing when we're seeing all the developer reports and the I think Electric Capital is the one that usually comes out with the growth of developers year over year, and Polkadot is still the chain where developer growth is high, and developer growth is just after Ethereum. So I think it's the place for builders, and this is where we see a lot of exciting technologies being built.
And Polkadot is actually ensures the security of the consensus, but there are other parties that will participate in joining your project, such as the wallet, the smart contract part, VC and the investors. There's a lot of small stuff involved. So what kind of security problems that your project might be facing, and how do you ensure what security management are in place to prevent this kind of security issues happen?
So it's really one of the things that where Polkadot is so powerful, that we can rely on the CS security model on Polkadot, and be able to actually interact trustlessly with the different chains in the ecosystem. So that's why looking at the interoperability and XCM is really powerful way of making sure that we can definitely trust what comes from other chains. And that's also why when I'm looking at where to actually go next, then looking at where do we actually get the trustless bridges. So the trustless bridge to Ethereum, can we go through Moonbeam and utilize what the infrastructure Moonbeam built? Because this is all underneath the umbrella of shared security on Polkadot, and you have trustless infrastructure. So for me, that's really what we're ensuring with being on Polkadot. When we talk about personal information and like KYC, AML, what I see here is really much of how do we make sure we have very trusted parties that are doing the credentials. And that's one of the key points for us that we've been working on for the better part of a year, of having relationships with really trusted parties that can do this KYC AML. And unfortunately, we do have partnerships coming up in that space. Unfortunately, we can't disclose the name of those ones, but can just say that these are that the party we are talking to is a highly trusted party, and someone that's actually able to do this on a global scale. So we're really excited for when we can actually share more about that, because that is also really much of making sure that the personal information of anyone actually participating is kept personal and kept with a party that each of these individuals can actually trust.
Amazing. And you are an early and significant builder of Polkadot. And so far, Polkadot ecosystem has seen significant growth, and the contents of the white paper has gradually become a reality. Has your perspective on Polkadot changed as a result of changes in the market environment and other factors? So what is your current assessment of the status quo of Polkadot ecosystem?
No, I think it's amazing to see all the things being built. It's the thing we talked about before, that it's the most active ecosystem in terms of builders and builder growth. Polkadot is acquiring builders at a higher rate than what we saw in the beginning of Ethereum, and the number of developers on Polkadot is only second to Ethereum. And we see, like, week over week there are usually these statistics of where do we see more development activity on GitHub, and just seeing that Polkadot and Kusama are always the ones lying. If it's not on the number 1 spot, then they are like then they are in the number 2 spot, because one or two projects might have done a specific commit or something that single week. So see a lot of these very good indications that builders are building on Polkadot. And this is where you can actually build quite complex things. So mentioned before, security is essential, and I think everybody can see that also when we come down the line of that. Why do you have to build that yourself? Utilize something that's bigger on Polkadot and make sure that your chain is secure. Also, one of the things that actually important for us is that we can decide completely how we actually want to build our own chain. So one of the things that for user interface and usability of blockchain is usually a bit tricky is that if you are doing anything on Ethereum, then you need ETH as being gas for anything. And you might not want to hold ETH to be able to interact on some chain somewhere. So what you can do on Polkadot is you can decide that yourself with your own chain of how do you actually want to implement any kind of model for transaction fees. I think one of the Polkadot parachains just announced that they're actually doing like gasless swaps. So they actually have a DEX where you actually do not have to pay any gas as long as you do a certain amount of transactions, which I think is really cool. It's another way of actually just removing the barriers of entry for the users. So I think it's a matter of, and I discussed that with one of our developers yesterday, was that we're working a bit on the UI UX for the users, and was really keen on the fact that we're actually getting to a place where we potentially, with the power of Polkadot and the tools that is on Polkadot, actually can build something that looks like Web 2, but the whole backend is Web 3. So it's decentralized, trustless technology that runs. But for the average user, you actually don't have to see all the technical blockchain stuff. And I'm sure that a lot of your community that has been in Polkadot for a long time has tried to interact through Polkadot.js, which is all kind of cool and a bit interesting, but it's not easy. It works well, but it's very techy, and if you understand the tech, then it can do a lot of stuff, and it's really powerful. But for a lot of users, it's also how do you actually make the user experience a lot better. And I think we're actually getting to a place where this actually becomes possible. And then I think last one to talk about here is also we talked about interoperability, cross-chain transfers, which is major for us because we use that in our product offering. But also, as we're talking regulation change, and we talked earlier in the talk also about how the regulatory landscape is actually changing right now. So the possibility of doing runtime upgrades via self-executing on-chain governance on Polkadot is also just something that makes sure that you continue to be able to actually adjust the product if all of a sudden something changed, or the community figure out, hey, let's adjust a bit of what we're doing because the environment changed around what we're doing. So the runtime upgrades and being able to do that in a trustless manner on a decentralized network is also something that's really key. So yeah, really excited for what lies in the future of both Polimec and the overall ecosystem of Polkadot.
Last but not least, could you share with us some big things to come about Polimec in 2023?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing is that we expect to launch. So we expect the launch to happen in Q3 or Q4 according to our current roadmap. Then partnerships is going to be a big thing. We right now have published partnerships with Kilt and Moonbeam. I hinted at before, we want to partner with other of the smart contract platforms in the Polkadot ecosystem, but also looking at some of the other protocols in Polkadot actually doing integrations for how do you actually easily do integrations to payment systems and so on. So that could also that's also something that will be coming up. And then I think really exciting enterprise partnership for the KYC AML setup that unfortunately I cannot name, but will be really exciting when that one comes out as well. And then what we are mostly excited about actually is now that we can start engaging with the community. And how do we actually engage with anyone that's interested in Polimec, both on the sort of the community side, but also to start interacting with all the projects that are building a very interesting tech on Polkadot, because these are the ones that we would like to go out and help and help them in getting success in their fundraising and doing it very easily. So we are starting to talk to a few projects here in the beginning, but would definitely leave it up to anyone that is hearing this chat as well. Of by all means, reach out if you are in the planning of doing fundraising, because this is something that usually takes a long time, and it might be that we're not launching before QT, but like this is something that you think about for quite a long time, and we are obviously happy to help and can figure out how can we actually do something together to get to a place that once Polimec is live, that we can basically get out and start doing the fundraisers very, very early, and make sure that they can take advantage of Polimec from the very start.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I think that's all for our interview of today, and hope in the future that we can catch up more and help your project to get more exposure to our community, and hope our community loves your project.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure to be able to explain a bit more about Polimec, and yeah, many exciting things to come. So really looking forward, and hopefully we can have more chats going forward on Polimec and the whole Polkadot ecosystem.